Hi, my name is Benedict for Higher Hertz. In this video, we're looking at TAL Chorus LX. It seems that I have not covered that, and apparently that is remiss of me. It's cool. Does what it says it's going to do. We could in some ways just leave now, but I probably haven't added much value to your life. So I will actually take the time to work through the device, which is pretty simple, but also to really help you understand what chorus is, how it works. Because a lot of people I notice do really struggle with getting their head around what chorus is, how to make something good out of it, how not to overdo it, how to use the great things that it can do, how to minimize some of the maybe not so great things that it can do. But chorus really generally is your friend, so long as you understand how it works. So let's dig in a little bit. So here we have an electric piano sound. We have TAL Chorus open, but at the moment it's doing nothing. We will see that essentially it's got two buttons. One and one twice. One and two. And there is the ability to have it into three, which is 1 plus 2. So sound. Chorusing is about making something seem like there are several thereof of it. While that's where it started, chorusing then became a way of making a warmer, richer, smoother, and even a wider sound, which is what we hear here. So that's mode 1. Mode 2, which is a lot more intense. And then mode 3, which is in some way combining 1 and 2. That's essentially the sound. Now, it is famous because it came on the Juno 60. And TAL happens to have an emulation of one of those, and this chorus is extracting these two buttons. Juno 60, mid-80s, polyphonic synth, nice instrument. But people wanted it to be fatter, and it only had one oscillator. So there was no simple way to say, let's add more oscillators, let's put the unison button, because it didn't exist. So we could press button 1, we can press button 2, which as you hear is fatter, chewier, but it is more movie. And then the pair of them at once. And that style of sound became immensely popular at the time, but incredibly popular, and it became the de rigueur thing and helped lead to the unison sound in the 90s, especially as people were using things like 106s that were pretty thin because they were DCOs, and this really helped transform this sound that people felt like they didn't want these sort of really nice focus, sort of fluty type sound. They wanted to be able to turn it into this great big sound. So that's where it comes from, and the Juno chorus is pretty darned important. TAL, as we have seen on the other videos where I've covered most of his things, he's an independent developer, a smallish developer with a good name and a well-deserved good name. TAL delivers devices that do what they say they're going to do. He doesn't gild the lily. So he doesn't suggest that getting any of his devices is going to turn you into Armin van Buuren or whoever is fashionable this week, Dua Lipa or whatever, don't know, don't really think it matters, because it's an unwise thing. He doesn't suggest that using his devices will make you sound more pro. All of these are really good things because there's too many manufacturers who gild their lily, which leaves me feeling less like that they really are that great, because if your product's that great, you shouldn't need to about it. You should just be able to show it and people go, ooh, yeah, that's good. And TAL stuff does its job very solidly. A lot of people like their TAL instruments and effects and what have you, and I understand why. In terms of price, this little fellow is free. It's a freebie. He's got a few freebies, obviously, to get people on the TAL train. Fair enough. And this does exactly what it says. And so if you like it, then it's a really good thing to grab onto. I normally do the good and bad. Well, it's a little bit limited here. It's free. It sounds pretty Juno-y. This is exactly what we want. It's a nice sounding thing. Is it a versatile chorus? No, not at all. It's got 3 buttons. This extraction makes it a little bit more versatile, which we will have a look at, but basically it's a Juno chorus. In terms of bads, well, honestly, I got nothing. I could make some stuff up. We can talk about how it doesn't have any of the god-awful hiss and distortion and all kinds of other problems that you get when you get a real synth with a chorus unit on it. Oh my god, the Paraphonic 505. Actually, the Casio CZ3000. I had the 1000, didn't have a chorus button on it. The 3000 had a chorus button on it. Yep, not a selling feature, I can tell you. So really, I got nothing as a negative. So, how chorus works, I think, is worth looking at before we go through the specific knobs and buttons on this fine fella. So I shall bring up another graphic which looks an awful lot like this, making a chorus. If you already know this stuff, feel free to skip it, but you may learn something that you haven't really understood before, and that's where a lot of people come unglued when they're using choruses because they've perhaps got some broken assumptions. There are actually several ways of making choruses. This is just one, and because the Juno chorus is so popular, it's one of the most common ones that you will encounter in most situations. Most delay units where they give you modulation will work the same as this. So we start. We have, and I'll use a little graphical pointer for this, we have our dry signal, which is that. The chorus takes a copy of it. It clones it. If we put the two back together, they would just be twice the volume because they'd be literally on top of each other, assuming there was no kind of movement because of analogy signal wander or anything like that. In a perfect world, they'd literally be on top of each other, so your signal would just probably get about 3 dB louder. So it's a clone. It's now what we do with that clone. We actually move that clone a little bit in time. How far we move that in time helps define the sound of the chorus. If it's very tight, we tend to get what we refer to as flanging. So that's that really tight, whiny kind of a sound, a little like a guitar cabinet makes your guitar sound kind of Once we move past that a little bit, then it gets into the feeling of, oh, if we had 2 people doing this thing, then there's a little bit of movement around there. And that, as you can see from the picture, we can tell is going to start to make some phase cancellations. But it gets more complex than that, because otherwise that would just be the beginnings of a resonator. We then take a LFO and we modulate the speed. We're actually not trying to modulate the speed of that delay anywhere near so much as we're actually trying to change the pitch. So by pulling that delay backwards and forwards in time, then we actually make its pitch go up and down. So in the pitch mod image, we can see that it's no longer as perfectly same from saw to saw to saw to saw tooth. We've got the first one looks the same, and then, oh, hang on, they start to get shorter and then they start to get longer. So the relationship between the dry saw and the clone saw keep changing. I can't show the pitch very easily there, but that means that even if we weren't changing pitch, we would be changing phase cancellations. We'd be adding some, subtracting some. But this doesn't sound like a phaser because we haven't actually inverted our signal. But there are some similarities, and that's why you get some of that phasey, swishy sort of sound. So, original sound, delayed sound, moved back in time a little bit, and then we're moving that, which is making it move in pitch as well as in time. So the relationship between the dry and the cloned signal you can see is constantly evolving. But wait kiddies, there's more. That's a monochorus. This is a stereo chorus. So what we do is we clone our signal twice. We take our modulation, and when the LFO is going up on this side, the first clone goes up. We might pan that to the left, and we flip a copy of the LFO modulation. So when the left-hand signal is going up, the right-hand signal is going down. So now if you look at the green line, I've taken the length changes on that red signal and shuffled them so that where the red one's going short, the green one's going long, so we get our LFO modulation doing this. When you pan them out to stereo, then we get this wide feel. If your modulation is relatively small or is relatively slow, then you will find that that's not super noticeable. If you go fast, it becomes like a vibrato, and then we start to get into different kind of chorus type units. But this is how the one button works. It takes the dry signal, keeps it down the middle, takes one clone, pans it to the left, takes the modulation signal so it goes up and down, which creates that relationship of time and tune against the original. There's a second clone taken and it goes down instead of up, remember, like this, and it creates a late relationship to the original in time and tone, so it phase cancels and shifts around, and it creates a relationship with the signal on the other side. So we've got 3 layers of interaction, and that gives us that classic Juno chorus sound. What the Juno is doing exactly, I don't know. There are specific numbers that are just preset. In a fancier chorus unit, we would have control over that initial delay that the clone gets, and maybe more other sorts of things like the rate and the depth. But the Juno chorus, you had no control over any of that, and so there are some presets. We'll have a look at what they are and how they work. Here's a sound I prepared earlier. Pretty classic sort of what I call the Ricky Wilde sound. It's doing it the lazy way with an arpeggiator, but yeah. Suddenly, oh, hello. Even wetter. And we're feeling all kinds of stranger things. That's it. What the device has is that ability to use our 3 modes. So mode 1 is, you can hear it swing if you've got good speakers or cursed headphones. That's simply as our LFO is doing this. We can actually hear that signal move from side to side because I've taken the dry signal out. The feature of this is that we can mix our wet and dry. So if we hear only our only our wet, then we actually get a less pronounced sort of a chorus, but this big spacey sort of thing. So it's going to be a very slow LFO, as in it's not moving fast like a vibrato, it's moving quite slowly. And because it's moving quite slowly, there can be a fair amount of depth, which gives us that feeling of, sounds like Chariots of Fire. Number 2, we can hear that movement a lot faster. It's possible that the depth is not quite as high, because if we take, let's say, this much depth, there, so we can see it, and it sounds good whilst the LFO is really slow. If we double the speed of the LFO, this will now start to sound like this, which, if this sounds good, this probably sounds drunk. So it's entirely possible that with a slow LFO speed, they've got quite a bit of depth, and that as they've sped things up, they've pulled the depth down so that it feels about the same. Simply it's moving faster, so it's more pronounced. Then, with the original in, we've got that three-way interaction. Subtle, shall we say? Pretty kind of broad. And then both at once. Exactly how this is done, I have read different stories. Which one to believe, don't know. Some stories simply say, well, it's a third value on the rate. Other stories say that you've got the rate of 1 and the rate of 2, and they're two LFOs. I question whether that would really be the case. It would be very interesting, because you'd have one LFO going up and down slowly, the other one going up and down fast. You combine the two. If we just plus them together, not FM them together, then we're going to have a thing that moves more like this. And that might be what we're hearing. I can still hear the slower one going. The faster one, well, it's probably going to be a little harder to hear. I'm not sure what the logic is there. If it's two separate LFO rates, I guess it's possible, maybe through divide down or something like that, or it's raining quite heavily. Then that's okay. Or it could just be a discrete third setting of the rate and depth. Either way, that is the sound of your Juno. Dry. 1, 2, 3. It does get bigger, but you can see our level changes here as well. Same, added more again, which might even indicate that we are quite literally, and I've read this quite a lot of times, is that we could quite literally have two chorus circuits, which is what I think is probably happening here based on what we see with the level, is that we put it through our first chorus, our slow chorus, then we actually take the output of that and put it through our fast chorus. And yeah, either way, we end up with a bigger sound. Something that is really nice about this extraction, well, we've got the volume thing to be able to keep our levels consistent for an A-B. But what's really nice is that we can collapse our stereo width. One of the warnings I always give people with regards to choruses is because it sounds nice in solo, it's all nice and out there, it's very easy to go, ooh, and everything in our mix is highly chorused and highly stereoized. And that makes it really hard to mix. And people are then in forums going, oh, well, why is it so hard to mix? Oh, I suck at mixing. You know what? One thing you could do is this. You can always start your track with your bass out like this, and then if you pull it in, we will get a more manageable sound. We can take that sound and pan it out, and now it behaves better if it's narrowed down. Entirely up to you how you do it, but don't overlook that width thing. Because while it doesn't sound as good in solo, it will help you focus in a mix a lot better. Let's turn that off and have a look at some different kinds of sounds. So we've got our... Actually, we'll turn that back on for the moment. We feed it a more complex sound. Here how the sound gets even thicker. So we don't necessarily need to have as much chorusing. And that's really changing what we're hearing. Sometimes it even makes it harder to tell the different octave moves. So if you want to, you can move the balance a little. But don't assume, again, that 100% wet is necessarily the best, especially not without pulling it back. That's probably a better 50-50. You can hear that because you can actually hear the phase cancellations. If you're wanting to hear the phase cancellations and work out your 50-50 properly, put it in mono, because that helps you hear them. Our levels look about right now, so we're probably at 50-50. Play with those, find what makes your sound work right. There is no 100% thou shalt, but also equally, just as I'm saying, watch out for the tendency of doing this, because it will make it hard to mix if we've got other sounds. If it's just this, and a kick drum sitting in the middle, easy enough. But if we've then got some stringy type sounds, let's now turn this off. Because of the... dull even with the... If we've got that everything wet, now notice we would have our bass and our string both trying to live here and here when I get my hands in exactly the right spots, which means they're just going to fight with each other. You've got to pull one in. So you can decide to pull your string in. Oh, the chord there made me think of Turn Me Loose. Turn me loose. Worst problems to have. So we can get a really rich sound just out of that one oscillator. Add in a couple more. Let's take out the original. So that's just your classic modern detune left and right. And then this original. The first oscillator is actually every note changing tune, which makes each key strike unique. And that's a really beautiful, rich sound. Nice sound. Huge sound. Which, even with a fairly collapsed stereo, still sounds nice and wide and robust. What you can put on your, like what sounds you can use your Juno chorus for, well, absolutely anything. People put them on guitars. They do sound good on electric pianos, of course. I'm hearing some distortion in the cans. It might be coming from the analog tape. Probably need to pull this back a little bit. Now, if you want your electric piano to not sound particularly chorused, But to get this nice wide but floaty feel, you can go 100%. If it's too wide, you can just pull it back. So we're not listening to that thinking, oh, it's chorused. We're just going, oh, isn't that shiny? Now it sounds a little shimmery, which is great if you want it to be shimmery, or chorusy if not. Absolutely anything that you can chorus will respond really rather nicely. So while I'm not a fan of the one knob kind of, here, you don't need to know anything about it, if you are going to say, look, I'm finding this chorus thing a little bit hard, I just want something that works, then the Juno style and this little TAL chorus that costs you nothing is a pretty good way of going. But please don't just assume that it's 100% set and forget. You're still going to want to manage your levels. And then when it comes to mixing, your width. If you're sending it out to a mix engineer, then play with this on the guide mix that you send over and then mute it. So send the guide mix like this. Because if you've set something up that you like, it may actually cause some problems. There are a couple of times where I've had people, despite advice, sent over choruses already built in. Oh, but that was in the synth patch. That's not my thing. I was like, well, okay, it's your sound. You chose it. But the chorus that's on there can fight with everything else that's been done in the mix. And yeah, you might be able to say, oh, but that's the sound. Your job's to mix to it. Yeah, maybe. But it's removing options. If I can hear in your guide mix that you've done this, then I'm going to take that into account, and if I think that it works, I'm going to work with that. Or if you really think, hey, that has to be that way, that's the bestest this sound could ever be, then send me that track twice. Once as dry and once with chorus. I'm then going to be able to go, okay, which is going to work better in the end. None of it's about ego. It's all just about being able to get a mix that works. And if you've set your choruses, or your choruses have been set a certain way, and I'm working differently, and the sounds around it, let's say some strings up against our electric piano here, you've got your electric piano doing this because it sounds super, and then I've got a string, and what it needs to sound good is different from what you've decided sounds good here. They will actually fight with each other in the mix. And if you're not experienced, you'll go, oh, not notice it, but then wonder why it's hard to mix things and start carving things and brutalizing things, whereas it could just be a case of saying, okay, I like the concept, I like what you're doing, but the rate that you've got there is not comfortable with the rest of the piece, in which case I'm going to grab a chorus with a knob, or even just an ability to set the delay to move it somewhere else, so that suddenly then they all feel like they belong together. That's just a few extra tips for those sort of pushing ahead and doing it on their own. My final words is, this chorus is free. You've really got nothing to lose. It doesn't work in every single possible permutation of situations, but it does do a very good job of exactly what it is meant to do. Yes, it doesn't have the noise or the distortions that you can get, but we've got a billion ways of adding those sorts of things. So there was really no sense in TAL adding it, because it was never considered a good feature of the icky choruses that came inside synthesizers. If you really need it, as I said, there are so many other things out there that you can use to make nasty. There are no real downsides other than just not overdoing it. And that's just part of learning mixing. That's not the fault of this device at all. It's very much to its credit that it gives us wet, dry, stereo width, and volume. He's seen all these issues. as being possible problems, and rather than just going, it doesn't matter, he's actually said, here, I've given you all the solutions you're going to need there as well. There is a compatibility button. I assume that's for an older version. It seems to just make everything louder. Again, fair enough. If you've downloaded the new version and find that it doesn't seem to work compared to the old version, hit the compatibility button. I assume that solves that. But I'm speaking more to people who are moving forward, in which case, leave it off. You don't want to leave it on because it simply makes things louder. Louder is not better. I hope you've enjoyed this program. I hope you found some value in it. I hope you've learned some about chorusing and using choruses in your mix. And if you have any questions in general, please not about Tal, that's to go to Tal himself, then hit subscribe, type them on in below. Even if you just want to say, hey, that you really love the program, we appreciate that because obviously we love to see that sort of stuff. But also that engagement lets YouTube know that you value us. That's really it. Oh, my name is Benedict, again for Higher Hertz, and you can pop over to higherhertz.com. If you're over there and you like the idea of this, but you're looking for more control, then there is always our free Hertz delay. It is a little bit more complex, but if you want to get into these kinds of choruses attacked in a different sort of approach, then you will find that interesting once you've got your head around this wee fellow. So the thing that matters is go out there, make music, and have a great day.